I'm going to attempt to cover a very controversial topic, so please bear with me without judgment and keep an open mind until the end. Unfortunately, I have to give the disclaimer. I hate to have to do this, but I know, people are quick to call you racist if you discuss these things, so please try to refrain from that. And, I will say I am white, but I'm also very pro-black. I'm pro everything. I'm pro freedom. It doesn't matter the race to me. And the reason why I'm doing this is to not put down the people in the movement that are trying to get justice for black people and equality and all this other stuff, because I know that they mean well. But just because someone means well doesn't mean that they are correct. Doesn't mean that they have the answers. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I want to present to you what I believe is a lot of factual information, and you can make your own judgment yourself. But at least you will be making the judgment after hearing all this information, whereas what we're hearing from these groups and the media is just one simple statistic, which is the disproportionate amount of blacks being killed by police. They say blacks are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police, which is a half truth, and we're going to look at the other half of the truth. Now, I'll be covering a lot of different articles online, and there's too many to list, but I'll list the most important ones in the description below on the YouTube video. And if you're watching somewhere else, check me out on YouTube. My channel is The Awareness Revolution. But I want to say one more thing before I get started. I have told my personal stories and other related videos. I'll also link to them in the description. Just to give you a quick recap, I have lived in black neighborhoods, went to predominantly black schools where I was basically the only white kid in my class, and I even bought my first house in a black neighborhood, so I'm certainly not racist. I've been dealing with this my whole life. I've had all kinds of different experiences, including multiple accounts of police brutality. I do believe that police brutality is a huge problem, but I think you're going to see here that it's not just a problem in the black community, and that is a part of the narrative that they're focusing on, and it's not entirely correct. So let's dig into the numbers, facts, statistics, and the first one I want to point out is this one. It says from 1994 to 2015, white on white violence is down and black on black violence is down about 78-79%. And that is astounding. That's a huge decrease in violence. So the narrative would have you believe that there is an increase, that things are getting worse, but even though it has been a little bit worse in the past few years, still compared to 1994 and so on, the general trend is down significantly. So that is good news. That's great news. And I just wanted to start off with that because people have been polled and surveyed, and actually what they believe is the opposite. The opposite is true, that crime is getting worse. But that's just because the media. So also another thing is all this information is easily available online. I didn't do any fancy Google searching. This is right here on Google for everyone to go and see and verify for themselves. So the first thing I want to kind of mention is there is this concept that people are going with these protesters, and they're holding up these signs saying "Stop killing us." And of course they're talking about black people, even though, I don't know, this girl looks Asian to me, but it doesn't really matter. So, that sounds fair enough. Stop killing us. I mean, why, who could argue with that, right? But let's look at some of the statistics real quick about, this one is just a Wikipedia page, police use of deadly force. And in 2019, about 1,000 people were shot and killed by the police, according to the Washington Post. Mapping police violence, put it at 1,100, whatever. 24% were black people, despite them making up just 13% of the overall population. So this is the central argument that is driving the country nuts right now. And I'm going to show you why, if you just look at this one statistic, it's very misleading. Because the narrative is that blacks are being killed disproportionately to other races by the police. But the truth is about twice as many whites are killed than blacks. Now, of course, there's a lot more white people, so it is true blacks are killed disproportionately by the police. But if you just point at that one statistic and assume that the only possible explanation is racism, then you're really off. You're really not doing any critical thinking, any research or anything, right? This is just the one single point that they're shoving down people's throats that people know, and everyone assumes it must be because of racism. That's systemic in our culture and in our government. And another point I want to bring home is that the government is the problem. It's not so much racism, it's government. It's government power, and it's people, we call them statists, people who believe in the power of the state, the authority of the state. And, look up voluntarism, and realize that, we have been fighting the power of the government for a long time and fighting against police injustice and stuff like that. So I'm totally on board with that, but we've got to, if we want to find the right solution, we have to diagnose the problem correctly. So let's move on. So if you look over here, you see number of people shot to death by the police in the United States in the past few years. As you'll see, the whites are killed more than any other race. Again, this is just because we have a higher population is the reason why this is so high. But if we only wanted to focus on one statistic and run with racism as the explanation for it, white people could just as easily and say, hey, we're killed twice as much as black people. The police are racially biased against white people. But of course, that doesn't tell us the whole picture. Neither does their narrative either. And if you look, it's kind of, if you look at it, it's really, the deaths correlate to the population, but there's more to it than that, which we're going to get into. But again, if you look at like the total police deaths, around 1,000 and around 250, it varies by year, but we'll just call it 250 black people are killed by the police each year. Only, depending on the year, maybe 10 or 20 of them are unarmed. And unarmed doesn't mean not dangerous. Maybe they could be going for a weapon, or the police think they're going for a weapon, or they try to go for the police's weapon. So they're, it's still a relatively small number when you look at the total number of homicides. So right here, this is just to kind of show you Black Victims of Violent Crime Bureau of Justice Statistics Special Report. This is going to be a lot of what I'll be referencing in this video. Sorry I'm going fast, but I have a lot of information to get through, so bear with me. All right, and it says black males accounted for 52% of nearly 13,000 male homicide victims in 2005. So over half of the victims of homicide are blacks. But if you look at the number, we're looking at 6,800. Now, this is just 1 year, but this gives us something to go off of. Almost 7,000 murders of black males. So the police are killing a small fraction of the total black males. So if we want to go to stop killing us, who are they talking to? They really, they should be talking to themselves. I'm just going to say it straight up. Because, the police aren't killing. Just one police murder is bad enough, right? But, and it happens a lot. It's like I said, it's happened to me really, really. They beat me really bad. And, me being white, I don't think it had anything to do with it, but it certainly didn't help, right? They didn't see me and say, oh, he's white, he's good, we're not going to beat him up. No, it was bad. All right, so let's move on and just look at this one real quick. If you see all offenses, and then it's got it broken down by race. So if you look at, keep in mind, we have different population numbers, so, that's going to change everything. But, when you look at murder, these are the offenders, right? So even though blacks are a much smaller percent of the population, about a fifth, they commit more murders. So the black community is committing a disproportionate amount of the murders in the country. So that alone right there should be a sign, a red flag, a hole in their story, because if people are committing murders, then they're more likely to be met with deadly force by a police officer. And also, if you get caught stealing, you might not want to just shoot the police and die in a shootout, because you maybe get out of jail the next day, or maybe you won't even go to jail. But if you are you just committed a murder and the police show up, well, maybe you don't want to do 25 to life, and then it makes more sense to have a shootout with the police, because the consequences of the crime you committed are much more serious. So that means, the police are going to be are going to use a disproportionate amount of deadly force, because they're being called on a disproportionate amount of murders in the black community, right? So this is pretty simple, and if you go along, you see not all of them are as disproportionate. Some of these are more like white crimes, like if you look at arson. Definitely more of a white thing. I don't mean to laugh, I'm sorry, but just I guess black people don't do it as much. It's just a difference in whatever culture, mentality, whatever it is. So let's keep going on, and I'm gonna kind of drill similar information into your head through a few different perspectives. Because some of it doesn't make sense until you hear it a certain way, or you see a graph, which I'm going to show you in just a minute. It says, in 2015, men committed 62% of murders and were 79% of all murder victims. So this is mostly a male thing, both victims and the offenders. But actually, 79% are of the victims, so it means, that's disproportionate right there. But black men committed 36% of murders and made up 52% of all murder victims. White men committed 30% of murders and accounted for 43% of all murder victims. So basically, even though there are far more white men are still committing significantly less murders than black men are. And this is something to keep in mind. Now, again, I hate even having to appear to be taking up for police here, but because I really hate police with a passion. But, I seek truth no matter where it takes me, all right? And I recommend that. Let's put our biases aside, because we need to get to the truth of the matter. But if you see a spider and then you see another spider that is deadly, and then the first spider it isn't deadly, one poses a serious threat to you and the other one doesn't. Or we'll say one is deadly and the other one's very deadly, much more likely to, because some animals, they might be deadly, but they aren't likely to attack you or things like this, right? So if you have an animal that you encounter and it's known to kill more humans, it's known to be more deadly, then you're going to proceed with more caution. You're going to see it as a more serious threat than some animal that rarely ever kills humans. So, it's wrong to judge all people of any race. I think just as it's wrong to judge a black person solely based on the color of their skin, I think it's wrong to judge any race based on the sole purpose of looking at their skin and saying, okay, well, they're this, and that includes white people. So if you look at white people and you think that all white people have privilege or all white people are racist, well then I think you're being racist. We have to keep things even and not allow one race to say this because of some past story that we've been told, but not allow white people to say it. Like, we can't say Black Lives Matter if white people can't say White Lives Matter without being racist, right? We've got to keep things equal if we even want equality, which equality is a never it just can never be accomplished. So that's why these people with the political agendas like to fight for equality, because it can never be accomplished, which means they'll always have a fight and always can get donations and votes and everything else. But so I just wanted to point that out. Now, it starts to get interesting here, so please, again, stay with me. I've got so much more information that's coming. Stay to the end if you can. Pause it if you have to. Come back to it. This information has never been more important in the history of the world. So here we go. Now, I'm going to show you a graph that's going to really put this into perspective. I'm very good with numbers, and even I had a tough time wrapping my head around these numbers. But here we go. This is the percent of violent incidents by victim and offender race in 2018. So, you see, of course, because white people is a much higher percentage of the population, we have the most number of violent incidents. Now, the offender is white 62% of the time. We are about that same population, so that's proportionate. Blacks are 15% of the population, and they are 13% of the population, and 15% of the time when a white victim occurs, 15% of the time it's a black offender. All right, but when you start looking at these numbers, what you notice is black people only have a white offender 10% of the time. Keep in mind, there are far more whites than there are blacks. Yet, a small percentage of the time, when blacks are the victim, it's very rare that a white person is the offender, even though almost 2/3 of the country is white. 70% of the time, it's a black offender. So, more often than all the other races, because if you look at these numbers, you see that, most of the time, people are killed by their own race, right? Which makes sense. You usually associate with people of your own race, you usually date people of your own race, you live in the same neighborhoods, go to the same schools of people of your own race. That's just generally the way that things are. But more than any other group, the blacks are killed by blacks. The vast majority, 70% of the time, when there's a black victim, 70% of the time, the black offender takes place, right? So, the difference is, let's go down here. So you see, this is, comparing to the percentage of the population. So when you look at whites, percent of violent incidents committed by offenders were 62% were white, and we're 62% of the population. And this is of the same race, right? Blacks, 70% of the time. The offender is the same race. Hispanic, 45. Asian, 24. So here's an interesting number. If you look at the percentage of times when the offender is of another race, it's 75.9, call it 76% of the time, Asians are the victim. The offender is of another race. So if any race were to make the claim that another race is killing them or violently attacking them, it would be the Asians. The Asians have a much stronger case. And if you look at the numbers, look at, the victim's race and compare it to the percentage of times they're attacked by someone of another race. When it's white, 38% of the time. Blacks, 29, 30% of the time. Asians 75% of the time. So of all races, blacks are less likely to be attacked by another race than any other race. And Asians are most likely to be attacked by another race. So if anyone wants to make this case, going by real statistics, not propaganda in the media, it would be Asians. Now this chart really puts it in perspective. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger. So this is interracial violent crime incidents. So that's one race attacking another race. This is using the same data, but it's using it in a different way. And it's a visual, and I think that it really puts it in perspective. So what we see over here on the left is black on white crime. And you'll see it's about 548,000 incidents just in 1 year, 2018. And let's just focus on black and white versus black, because that's the narrative, right? The blacks aren't complaining about Asians killing them, because they're not, right? They're not complaining about Hispanics. It's specifically a black and white issue. So let's just focus on that for now. If you compare the graph of black on white crime, it's way higher than white on black, even though there's far more whites. So if there was an equal amount, and this is what people want, they want an equal amount. They want, I guess, I don't know if it's I guess they want an equal amount of black people shot proportionate as white people by the police. But if you look at it, if that were to happen with this interracial crime, it should be the other way around. Since there's a lot more whites on black, we should be seeing a lot more white on black crime, and we don't. So basically, it's almost, the black on white crime is almost 10 times, it's about 9 times higher than the white on black, despite the fact that there's about 5 times as many white people. So times 9 times 5, you got 45. So the problem with interracial violent crime is 45 times worse with blacks attacking whites. This is a huge, huge number. This is a chart that no one wants to talk about. If anything, the whites are being attacked by the blacks. Now, that's not the whole story here, because, again, most of the time when a race is attacked is by their own race. But when you look at the interracial violent crime incidents, blacks are attacking whites much more than whites are attacking blacks. It's not even a close comparison. These numbers are so drastically different. Here's a disparity, right? This is a major disparity. And the argument is much stronger for whites being attacked by blacks, because we've got a lot of white victims and there's a small population of black people. Let's keep going. All right, so here's another bit of information to put things in perspective so we can get a real accurate view of what is going on. This is, if you look at table 4, the homicide offending by age and gender, 2005 per 100,000 population. And this really puts it in perspective because it's, per capita, per 100,000. So if you look, ages 14 to 17, black men, the number is 64. That's 64 murders out of 100,000 people. White men is 7.9. Call it 8. So that's 1/8 of the homicide rate, right? Then you look at ages 18 to 24. 203 black men out of 100,000, whereas only 22 white men. So it's about 9 times. So, using these numbers, and the same goes for once you're over 25, even though the rate drops, it's still proportionate. Black men commit homicide 8 or 9 times as much as white men. And that's just the truth, And most of the time it's a black victim, but sometimes it's white. And as we showed before, there's a lot more black on white crime than white on black. So where's the racism? See, this is the problem. If we just cherry pick one statistic and just assume that it's all because of racism, then we'd have to assume that the black on white crime is due to racism. Now, I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying, hey, if we're going to use their logic, then that's the case. But the truth is black men are much more violent than white men. That doesn't mean every single black person is more violent than every single white person. That's ridiculous. But when you look at a population of, per 100,000 people, these are the stats. All right. Now, one thing I haven't pointed out yet, but I think right now would be a good time, is to look at women. Women are, they commit significantly less murder than men. Now, even when you go across to the women section, white women commit significantly less murder than black women. But women commit a lot less murders, homicides, a little bit different, but whatever. Women commit a lot less homicides than men do. Now, when you look at police brutality, it's almost always men. So what I'm saying is that there's a correlation between the amount of violent crimes a demographic commits and the amount of police brutality that they receive. So I'm not saying that police brutality is cool or it's acceptable. It's not. That's a whole nother video. I've got all kinds of ways that I would like to see the justice system, if you want to call it that, reformed or just completely eliminated and replaced with a new system. But that's another topic for another video. If you're interested in that, leave me a comment below. As a matter of fact, while I'm on that topic, comment, let me know if you've got different stats, if you've got an argument for any of this. I'm open to discussion. I want to have this discussion, but, if you're just going to call me a racist for looking at statistics, just go somewhere else. That's the problem. We need to have open discussion about this. But back to the topic is, if we look at these stats, we look at the stats of police brutality, you could say, really, if you're going to blame it on something like that, then you would have to say the argument's stronger for the police being sexist, because most of the brutality is against men. But of course, that's nonsense. It's just men are committing the crimes, so of course men are the ones that's going to end up getting into altercations with the police officers. If you're digging this, make sure to give me a thumbs up, guys. Like it, share it. This really needs to get shared, spread far and wide. I don't see anyone talking about this. So I know it's controversial, and people might even call you a racist if you share it. But, I feel that it's necessary. So if I've got to be, I hate to use this analogy, but crucified on the cross in order to show people the truth, then, by all means, I'm willing to take the criticism, because I'm genuinely trying to make the world a better place. I'm not just supporting some narrative that someone else told me. I researched this. I've been researching this. I've known all this stuff for quite a while, because I saw that this was the narrative that has been brewing for years now. So this is another paper. This was done by Roland Fryer, and it's an empirical analysis of racial differences in police use of force. And I will just cut to the chase. You can just Google this. Like I said, I'll probably link it. It's long. It's quite detailed. This guy did a great job breaking this down. And I will just give you the conclusion. He found no racial differences in the police use of force. In fact, what he and other people have found is that if anything, the police are quicker to shoot a white person. Another theory that's come out of this is that people of color, police officers who are black or Hispanic, they're more likely to kill their own race. And, I think there's a lot of reason. I mean, it's simple, think about it. If you're a white police officer and you shoot a black person, that's what people are going to think. They're going to think that you're racist. That's immediately what people jump to. So, a white police officer generally isn't going to want to kill a black person because it looks bad. And the media always points to those cases. There are far more police homicides of white people, but how often do we hear about that in the news? How often are they big, huge news stories? How often do people, start throwing protests and throwing a big fit over the police killing a white person? It never happens. So you can basically kill a white person and not get made into a national news story. But if a white person kills a black, well, that can quickly and easily be turned into a national or worldwide news story, if you want to call it news. But, just to be fair, there are criticisms of it. Of his paper, of course, there's going to be criticisms of everything, right? So you can just look it up. Roland Fryer is wrong. Read this criticism. I mean, personally, you can just look at the website. I mean, site logo. It doesn't even have a logo. You don't even get a logo on your site, and you're going to critique a paper. If you can't build, and there's nothing on this, but whatever. It is what it is. That's fine. That's fine. But you can read the critiques and decide for yourself. Now let's move into another area of this narrative of, this injustice, inequality, and everything. And that is the financial aspect of it. Because that's what people think of. They think of, okay, there's police brutality, and then blacks have a disadvantage financially. So let's go ahead and tackle this one. So this is a statistic. It's kind of like the disproportionate, police brutality statistic. It says the median income of black families is $33,000, is lower than that of all families, which is $50,000. So that right there makes you think that black families they don't make as much money. So therefore it must be because of racism. Let's look deeper into that. So ask yourself, is the system skewed towards whites? Do whites have an advantage over other races because the system is inherently tilted in their favor, right? All you have to do is you look at the median household income of the different races, and you see that Asians make significantly more money on average than white people. So if white people have rigged the game in their favor, then they must have messed up. They must not be doing it very well because Asians make significantly more. Why could that be? How could this be the case? Well, that alone shows that, it can't be that the whole system is just in favor of white people. And it can't be, because of racism. What are whites? What, do they like Asians more than their own color? Maybe it has nothing to do with race, and we're going to get into that. I'm going to show you why. So, again, let's look at this. So, in this order, Asians make the most, followed by white people, followed by Hispanic, followed by black or African American. I don't like the term African American because most of them's never even been to Africa. Black. Some people don't even like black because they're brown and not black. Whatever. But I think black is better than African American. But anyways, that's just me. It's my own personal digression. Now, if you look at this is interesting. It doesn't matter which year you want to look at. It's pretty similar across the board with very small variants. But so let's look at black. This is the children and single parent families by race in the United States. All right, we're just gonna deal with 2009 because it's the same throughout the other years. But blacks, 67% of black families live in single parent families. Okay, Latino is 40, so not as much. Whites, 24, which is even less than Hispanics. What does that mean? Asian or Pacific Islander, 16%, even less than whites. So if you look at the correlation, the lower the percentage of single parent families, the higher the median income. And first of all, it's pretty simple to understand. If you've got two people in a family, you're probably going to make more money than a single mother, right? It's just I was raised by a single mother, and it's rough. I don't know. We have one kid, and both parents in the family. Right now, we're raising our daughter, and it's tough. It's tough. Even with two parents, one kid is tough. I was raised with one parent with two kids, two boys. We had a stepdad come into the picture later on. He moved us out of the poor area into the suburbs, but he was never much of a father figure. He just moved us out the hood, basically. But, so my personal experience is right on with this. And, I lived when I was growing up, I had a single mom. And we lived in the poor areas, which were mostly black. When my stepdad came into the picture, we moved into a better neighborhood. We were we were getting robbed a lot and stuff. So he moved us out of there right away. And, we moved into the suburbs, which happened to be mostly white. And I'll just tell you this, the black kids tormented me. I don't put anything against them because, kids pick on kids, whether if they're fat or they have glasses or whatever. I stuck out because I was white. When I went to the white schools and it was the other way around and only like one kid was black in the class, the white kids did not pick on and hit and kick the black kid. So it was just completely different. So what I'm saying is that there is a correlation between the amount of single-parent households and the median income. So when you look at median income, family, this doesn't tell the whole story because blacks are significantly more likely to be raised with a single mom or single parent, but it's usually a single mom. And let's look at some more statistics. This is the percentage of white families with a single mother in U.S. who live below the poverty level. So, it ranges by the year, right? Anywhere from about 20% to 24%. So, if you are white and there's a single mother in the household, you have about a 20% chance of living in poverty. Now, if you're black with a single mother, your chance of living in poverty is 30 to 40% chance, usually 30 to 35. So yes, admittedly, it is higher. But the thing is like I said earlier, the quest for equality is just never going to happen. It doesn't mean that any disparity is caused by racism, right? So you could line everyone up for a race and, give them 30 seconds to run, and they're not all going to end at the same spot. Probably, most likely, if you put 10 people, you line 10 people up and let them run for 5 minutes, not one of them will be on the same exact, line as the other. Some people will make it far, some people won't make it nearly as far. And that's just the case with everything, right? When you watch a race, NASCAR, which I don't, I think, but all of them start somewhere different. But that's never an excuse for winning or losing. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. And we're not all equal. Some people are very bad, some people are very good people. So you can't expect everything to be the same across all races, really, and about anything. We should all have an equal opportunity, but to expect an equal outcome is just ridiculous, right? And we can't complain about that. Now, if it's just because of racism, I get it, which that's the narrative. But as you're seeing here, it's not because of racism. All right, so let's keep looking. I've got just a few more to go. The poverty rate of black married couple families. So if you are black and you've got two parents that are married, you have a 7 to almost 10% chance of living in poverty. So this is the big difference. 30%, 40% versus 7%. Now let's compare it. So if you're black and married, you have less than 10% chance of living in poverty, whereas if you're white with a single mother, you've got a much higher chance of living in poverty. So it seems to me that the number one attributing factor of living in poverty is whether you have a single mother in the house or a mom and a dad. All right. Now you look at percentage of white married couple families in the U.S. who live below the poverty level. So yes, the whites, even if they're married, they're gonna have a lower chance of living in poverty than black families that are married. Is that because of racism? I'll leave it to you to decide, but I don't think so. I think there are a lot of reasons. I'm not going to go into them here, but this is what's causing poverty. And I'll end it with this last point right here. 3 rules for staying out of poverty. And they are, and this comes from the Brookings Institute. Spent a great deal of effort studying this issue. What they found is that you can avoid poverty by 1, graduating from high school, 2, waiting to get married until after 21 and do not have children till after being married, 3, having a full-time job. If you do all 3 of these things, your chance of falling into poverty is just 2%. Meanwhile, you'll have a 74% chance of being in the middle class. It says these rules apply to all races and ethnic groups. Breaking these rules is becoming more commonplace, unfortunately, for all racial groups. This is interesting to know because this is something that we can control. We have control over this isn't really asking much. And so basically, if you do these things, you'll have just a 2% chance of living in poverty. So that's a very small chance of living in poverty. And this is really, granted, I don't really necessarily agree so much with marriage, I'm not married, I have a kid, whatever, but it's a general rule. Whatever, you don't probably have to be married, but if you're together and you have a great relationship, I would say that's the case with us, whatever. But the point is this is what is expected of you anyway, right? This is what is really a minimum requirement, right? Graduating high school, which doesn't have much to do with anything, but whatever, it's a stat. Having a full-time job, come on, if you're not working full-time, of course you're going to be living in poverty, okay? So there's not really too much to ask. If that is your concern, you don't want to live in poverty, do these 3 things, and you are most likely going to be good. You're going to have a 74% chance of being in the middle class. And the thing is the narrative, what they're shoving down our throats is basically black. I mean, it's really racist if you think about it. It's a privilege to be born white. Blacks have a disadvantage. And I mean, that's just kind of like the famous Henry Ford saying, think you can or think you can't. Either way, you're right. You want to set people up for success. And the first part of that is a mental game. You want to believe that you can achieve. And this is a lot of what was discussed in Napoleon Hill's great book, I think from the 1930s, Think and Grow Rich. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And, this is just principles of success that apply to all of us. But when you raise kids in a way that makes them think that the system is rigged against them, then there's really not. They don't believe that there's much of a there's not much of an incentive for them to try to make it in the system. So they rebel and they do whatever they want. Because they think that the game is rigged. If you go into a casino and you think it's rigged, then why would you really want to play? You don't want to. So that's why there aren't as many people participating in the system, because they think it's rigged. And this is doing more harm than good, I believe. And, we can't change our color. We can't change our history. We can't change the past of, the founding of the country and all this other stuff. But through my research, I found that the story that we've heard about slavery in particular is very skewed. And I think Thomas Sowell's book, Race and Intellectuals, does a great job of laying that out and puts it in a perspective that really changed my eyes forever. I'll link to that audiobook on YouTube below. Because, it's 5 hours long. You can read the book, you can listen to the audiobook, but either way, you'll see that, that we're basically being told a half-truth about our history anyway. And as bad as it wasn't as bad as what they're telling us. And I'll leave that to you and your own research. But I think that it's being done for racial division as a means of oppressing black people even more. And as a way of creating a strong need for government, to redistribute the wealth and create all these problems, which, by the way, I think that welfare had a pretty big part in what is making single-parent households so high in the black community. By offering welfare, you're given an incentive to not have a two-parent family. Because, if the dad isn't even working, you make more money if the dad isn't in the picture, and you don't really need a dad because you can just live off the government. Whereas if there was no welfare, you would need to have a dad in the picture, and then you would be more choosy about who you decide to have a kid with. You end up having more kids, maybe because you get more government money. And if you look at before the welfare programs took place, what we had is a much higher two-parent household percentage in the black community. And after the welfare, the percentage lowered significantly. And you can't say it's racism because there was much more racism before the welfare, around in the 50s and 60s than there is now. So the interesting thing is these welfare programs that are supposedly meant to help the minorities, such as the black community, actually ended up hurting them. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this was informative. Again, share it, give me a like, and make sure to subscribe to my channel. I've got plenty of other great videos on a wide variety of topics, not just race, but everything from health to, it's all over the place. So check that stuff out and leave me a comment below. Thanks so much.